Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be presenting today at this mini virtual conference and really excited to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is really how, as counselors, we can help our students make informed college decisions. So we're going to specifically be talking something about the 6 keys of college fit and what does that mean and how to help our students and families navigate through the kind of complex system that we have created surrounding admissions and applications and everything sort of pertaining to that high school to college process. So what I would love to give you today is a strategy that you can provide your students on making informed college decisions. So let's get started into this conversation. So first of all, who are we? So my name is Dr. Amanda Stirk, and I am the founder and CEO of College Unmazed. I have been doing this work for over 20 years and am passionate about, helping students and families navigate this process, but just equally as impassioned to really helping counselors to make sure that they have the tools and resources and information to help their families, because as counselors, we are so integral to that process. And when we are, 1 to 300 students, we get, or even more in some areas. I know in my area, it's like 1 to 450. It's hard. We get pulled in many different directions. And so unfortunately, a lot of our students don't get the resources or the time or the information that they need to really be successful, both in high school and then on to their post-secondary institutions. So I've been in the K-12 system. My dream job was to be a counselor. And then I sort of got into this role in dual enrollment and became a higher ed administrator with dual enrollment programs, and really kind of built myself as a national leader in college and career readiness in all different areas, but specifically dual enrollment. And one of the things that we did is I partnered with Dr. Tim Poynton and Dr. Rich LePan, who are experts in college and career readiness. They have their CVs. I can't even tell you how many pages it is on different research topics, everything with partnering with ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, and other, grants and things like that to create really, to create and study how we can, again, help students navigate this process. So together with my sort of practitioner background and then their research and everything that they do and the higher ed and teaching counselors how to be counselors, we came up with College Unmazed, which is really a step-by-step guide for students and their parents and counselors to navigate this process. And so we made it really simple and broke down. And when a lot of times counselors see our curriculum and our information, they're like, yeah, that's what I talked about. But we also have the research and the theory behind why we do what we do and really helping families make that informed college decision. So one of the things that we started with first is our College Unmazed, our main workbook, and that really is the 9th through 12th grade experience. The first half of the College Unmazed book, which is the red book, will actually help students that 9th and 10th grade experience build what we would consider soft skills, learning about themselves. We call that your U factor. We talk about your academic factor, your career factor, and then we talk about money, your money factor early on. And then we walk through a process in the second half of the book called LEADS, and I'm going to be sharing a little bit about that for you today. That's building your college list, exploring colleges, applying, how to make a decision, and then how to develop success plans. From that book, we created a side-by-side a parent book, which we now will have in Spanish, and we're really excited about that. But that helps a parent walk alongside their student and getting the same great information, but knowing how they can sort of add to the conversations, how you can use your college support network. And then we have 2 books that we call mini books, which is kind of unique groups of students and parents. So the first one being homeschool, and that's specifically for secondary students and families. And Dr. Michelle Avard and Holly Ramsey really walk families through how to navigate that process. So as a counselor, if you do have a lot of homeschool families or know of homeschool groups, phenomenal book. I learned so much, even as being an educator for over 25 years. My eyes were open to how families can navigate that process. And then lastly, we have the College Unmazed, Your Guide to Dual Enrollment. As I mentioned, I'm very passionate about that space, and there was no curriculum or guidance on how a high school student can be a college student early in their high school experience, sometime as early as 9th and 10th grade. So if you have a large concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment or career technical program, you definitely don't want to miss that curriculum and that book, because that will really help students understand, and parents, how to navigate that process. And we have all the curriculum to go with all of those programs: PowerPoints, lesson plans, pre and post tests. We have fun card sorts and different activities. So lots of resources. So definitely check out collegeunmazed.com. We're always sending blogs and free downloads. So definitely get on that newsletter to get that. Again, we're practitioners first. That's what we love to do. We're just taking all this information and putting it in a nice, pretty package for all of you. So let's start kind of getting into the information today. So there's really two big things that kind of our why to the work that we do. One of the things that we're really noticing are the trends in college applications, that, more students are applying to certain select universities. And we are seeing, I'm here in Florida. So for example, the University of Florida had over 90,000 applications. That's almost a 50% increase over just even last year. And so every year, more and more students keep applying. But then there's other schools that are really struggling with enrollment. And so the Common App can be a great conduit for a lot of, universities, but we are seeing this sort of, mass appeal to certain colleges, and other colleges are getting left behind. Because of that, we're seeing some budget cuts and cutting of programs. So really that admissions landscape, especially since COVID, continues to change. And we also know that over 65% of jobs that are, in the future require some type of post-secondary education. And we really believe that every student should have some type of post-secondary education, whether that's a community college, a technical college, a four-year degree, or beyond. And so when we talk about our programming, we're really kind of working towards that middle group of students who are interested in going to post-secondary education, and that's their path. But we also understand that once students even get to college, that not all of them are going to actually finish college. So unfortunately, about half of students will not even graduate within 4 years. Actually, it's about 41%, many of them dropping out or taking 5, 6, 7 years to graduate. And so we are kind of seeing this sort of influx of, there's decreased enrollment, there's too many applications, financing has changed with FAFSA and everything else. So there's just been a lot of changes. And we do know, though, at the end of the day, that when you get a four-year degree, that you in your lifetime will make over $1 million than somebody that doesn't have that degree. So again, that's kind of one of the first things that we kind of think about in why we do the work. The other process that we do is Dr. Poynton and Dr. LePan looked at essential college knowledge. So things of like the FAFSA, CSS profile, SAT, ACT, syllabus, those type of words, vocabulary. And they did a study that looked at students all the way from 9th to 12th grade, and they looked at that key college knowledge with college-going families. So that means that their parents have some type of, college degree, and then the first-generation students that they do not. So if you see FG versus CG, FG, the red line is first generation, the blue line is the college-going families, and you see in 9th grade that the difference between them answering, the right questions is pretty small, about 5%, 9%, and that's in like financial knowledge, and that's in general college knowledge. That's the difference between those two. But what happens over time through 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you see that the gap actually expands, that when they given the same information, the same quiz, that the gap of those two groups of students actually increased. As counselors, we're trying to decrease all of that. So it really makes it really difficult. So one of the things that we did in starting and working on this curriculum is we want to make sure that schools are able to close that gap and that everybody is getting the same information at the time that they need it the most in a scaffolded way that's not overwhelming. So one thing that I would really suggest is when you're looking at your college going program, that you're not just looking at what am I doing spring of junior year. A lot of us do these wonderful evening presentations, but a lot of the families aren't able to come. How are they getting that information? How are they accessing you? That we are actually starting this process as early as 8th and 9th grade and making sure that everybody has equal access to all the information. So let's kind of get started to our key information here. So here, I mentioned the College on Mays curriculum. So you'll see the first 4 chapters, which I talked about the different factors, and then it goes into your leads. And again, everything needs to be scaffolded at the right time with the right information. Otherwise, it gets very overwhelming and families don't know how to process everything. So what do they need to know as they go through? And that's College on Mays for you. And we do have some really fantastic mind maps. If you are interested in a poster that kind of breaks down all that essential knowledge and where it sort of lives, definitely just go to collegeonmays.com/downloads and you can download that nice and easy. If you want a printed poster, you can request that as well. We do have 18 by 24 posters. You're able to do that, but you can use these, borrow these, put them on your website, give them to students, but definitely gets you on track as well. And then we also have the lead strategy here as well. So really important that you think about college knowledge every step of the way and how do we talk about it. All right, so leads. So like I said, we're going to focus more on this presentation on sort of that second half of the curriculum, which is the leads process. So we have kind of 5 critical steps that families should know. So the first step is really what we call list, or the L in leads, right? So the first thing is to take all those colleges. I mean, there's over 4,000 2-year and 4-year schools, but if you take, say, 2,400, which would be the 4-year universities, you have over 2,400 colleges, and bringing those down to a more manageable number. Sorry, I don't know why those words are duplicated. Ignore that. And then if you look at, so that's really looking at those search functions, looking at certain information, and we'll go over that. And then we have E is explore. So that's once they start building that list, how do you then, when you do a college tour, when admissions comes to your school, what questions are you asking? How are you going a little bit deeper? And how are you starting to narrow down that list so you're getting to maybe the 8 to 12 colleges that you might be interested. The A is apply, which is really actually submitting those applications, really thinking about the different types, admission deadlines, priority, early admissions, all of those things, essays, letters of recommendation. So we walk students all through that process. And then the 2 things that I think that, and again, I was a counselor for over a decade. What I don't think I did well is to really teach students how to make an informed decision as they went through this process. So I did list pretty well. I did even explore pretty well. And I did apply really well. That was a big focus of mine. What I didn't do is the next step in teaching them how to go back through the information, really think about making that decision. How do you bring in desirability and all that into the equation? So our decide is really interesting, and I'm going to provide some information for you on that. And then lastly, before our seniors leave the building, every single student should have a success plan. So really thinking about their academic success, their financial success, and those strategies. And then also socially, how are you going to engage on campus? How are you going to take advantage of all the resources and things like that are on campus? So leads is really a fantastic strategy. So as you are working with students, I would implore you to really think about everything through the lead strategy. So one of the things that I think is important that we talk a lot about in our workbook is fit and college fit. So here you see obviously a picture, and all of counselors, we've all talked about Gestalt psychology and what's going on. So obviously when you look at this picture, you can either see a vase or you can see two faces, or maybe you see both, right? And so when we talk about fit, it's really about your perspective. Who's looking at this picture and what do they see? Do they see the faces? Do they see the bars? What does that look like? And what can be very difficult if I am a student looking one way and I'm a counselor looking another, or a parent looking another, how do we have that conversation about those different perspectives? And so, a lot of times when we talk about what's your college fit, it's very broad, right? So we just kind of mention something sort of in passing. Well, like, what do you like? What's the location? We kind of generalize what fit is. What I would really suggest to do is to consider fit from a different angle and be much more specific on how to both measure and find what a student's college fit is. So we have a program, we call it the 6 Keys of College Fit. So we've looked at all kind of the data that's out there, the information that's out there, and we organized it in 6 different key categories that every student, every parent, every counselor should look at every college through this lens. So the first one is academic match. So your academic match is a lot of times what we kind of focus on generally is, can I get in, right? And does it fit the type of student I am? So that could be your test scores, it could be your GPA, it could be how selective it is, maybe even student to faculty ratio, program size, availability. So those are kind of things that we look at normally in assessing a college. The next assessment, career match, is really looking at what opportunities the college offers to help me in my career development. So that could be my alumni network, maybe mentoring on campus, what type of internships will they connect me with, what type of career placement do they have, really what is that college to career process look like at each university. And sometimes the bigger universities, you have to self-advocate a little bit more. You have to go to those activities. You have to do that. My daughter is going to college next year, and they require a 1-credit career course for every single student. So even though it's a large university, they have, scheduled things within their program that they have to do every year. Others kind of leave it up to the student to access those courses or those programs. Also, important, and sometimes equally important, more to the parents than sometimes the student, is what we call financial match. So financial match is actually looking at not only the sticker price, what's kind of labeled for what we consider the cost of attendance, but really what is that net price? So what is the amount of scholarship, institutional aid do they give? Do they give just merit aid, or do they also give financial aid or financial aid only? What does that look like, and what's the average net price? And then also, what is the median debt? So if I leave this college, what does that look like in terms of who takes out loans, what's being offered? Personal match is another one that we really do kind of encompass the quote unquote general term of fit, right? Talking about diversity is important for a lot of students, institution type, that could be public, private, special mission, like maybe a single gender, maybe it is like an HBCU, things like that, colleges that change lives. What are my recreational options, my dorm food options? What does that sort of look like? These other 2 fits, again, we talk about, but not in a way of really discussing it and having students analyze it. Student outcomes. So really looking at, kind of that hard data that's coming out of the university, like graduation rates, retention rate, alumni salary, and then also loan default rate, right? We want to know what loans they're taking out, but how many people can't get a job to pay back that loan. And that happens a lot with some of those kind of pseudo for-profit universities where the degree really doesn't mean anything and they have all this debt and they can't get a job. And then lastly, in the 6 keys is the student support. Now, I feel like this is such a critical aspect of all of the college fit, and again, can be often overlooked. So what is on the campus that supports me as a student? That could be tutoring services. If I'm a first-gen student and maybe English wasn't my first language, what are the writing lab and how are they going to help me with that? How do I access my peer tutors? What does my access to my professors look like? Do they have additional tutoring and academic labs to help me? What about mental health counseling? We know 1 in 4 adults will have some type of mental health crisis in their life, and big transitions, moving to college. I heard from a family that it was going to be a month for their student to get into a mental health counselor at their university. That's scary to me, right? So knowing that, what does that access look like, especially if a student has exhibited some things while in high school, anxiety, depression. Alongside that, what if they have a 504 and IEP? What does their adaptive services look like? Are they there to support? Is it very active and open? And those are things that we need to look at and not be afraid to ask, right? Again, we want the student to be successful. That's one of the premise here, is we don't want them to be a number that just drops out. And then lastly, what are some of the on-campus things that could really help them get involved on campus, recreational, community service organizations, and so forth. So that's the 6 keys of college fit. So I just want you to take a moment and think about how your kind of perception of quote unquote college fit has maybe now changed. And looking at this, how might your conversations with students, knowing that, oh yeah, I should be looking at all of these, is really important. So just think about that. And what I would also like you to consider too is that every student's going to come into the 6 keys of college fit differently, right? So if I'm a 504 IEP student, that might be a leading driver to me as a family to make sure that my student have support. Maybe financial match. If I'm a struggling family and I really need to make sure that college is affordable and I don't want to take on that loan debt, what does that look like for me? And as a counselor, how do we work through that? And so really thinking about, letting the student understand and sort of rating what their most important factors are. And I'm going to show you some ways to do that as we get through. So here we've kind of talked about all of these aspects. I mentioned them in the last slide. But what we looked at is we looked at all the data that's out there and said, okay, what of these different matches, these different, college fit, can we provide the data or the information to? And so one of the resources that's phenomenal is something called IPEDS. And that is where all the colleges basically upload their sort of data for the year. And so we have a really cool chart that I'm going to show you. It's completely free to download and it's really great. But we've taken all that kind of key data and then matched it with the right fit. So when families are kind of going through this process, they're able to say, okay, these data points are matching academic match. These data points match personal match. And so if you know what their importance are, they know what to focus on. Now, there are some things within this information that is subjective, right? They have to actually go visit campus and they have to ask about adaptive services. They have to ask and look at the dorms and they have to make sort of a internal judgment on their sort of own ranking. How does that look, right? So knowing that some of this information is hard data that we can find very easily, other stuff they will need to fill out and learn as they go through the process, but it's still equally important to make sure that they understand all of these. So here are some, like I said, additional things, but all the things that we've already talked about. So one of the first things that we have students do is really, like I said, understand their importance to each of the 6 keys. So one of the things that we have is a card sort activity. It's really fun. So we've taken each of these, when we go back one. So each of these things like special mission, religious affiliation, ACT, SAT, and made them into a card. And so what will happen, you can kind of see a picture here. This is actually my daughter and myself. And so each card is one of those specific kind of terms. And so in the physical activity, it's just a little set of cards. what you do is you go in front of you and you can put in, you can make it very structured where you have a 1 through 6 rating, and they can go 1 being least important, 6 being most important, and then they can kind of force a decision that way. You could also take those cards and go, there's 2 buckets, most important, least important, and then work through those. But what you'll find is you can see on the picture, the cards are actually color coded. So when you come back to here, let's say a lot of them are green, then maybe academic match is one of the more important factors for a student, and that should be a focus. And financial match, and so forth, student support. And so what we find is when they do these cards, that what they thought was most important becomes maybe less important, right? Because you're opening up their eyes to other things that are important. Now, we will say through this process, all the keys are important, right? So but everything can't be a 6, right? Everything can't be the most important thing ever. So you have to sort of weigh out that pros and cons and what does that look like. But at least as they go through the process, they understand what's most important inherently to them. And so I always like having the parents do it as well, and then having the students do it as well, and then to communicate how it looks very different, right? So again, doing this with my own daughter, obviously as a parent, financial match was a big deal for us, right? We have to write that check. And for her, it was more like distance from home and campus feel and things like that, and special missions. So there were different things that she was looking at. And so it allowed us to have a conversation. And when we disagreed, or when we had kind of a question, we found that we were going back to this 6 keys, and she was able to really articulate then what she liked about each college and what she learned and so forth. And it really just makes for a better conversation. We also have an online version of this. If you just go to collegeonamaze.com and you go under My CFP online, there's just a free little one that you can do, which it's fun. It's it's a nice little card sort. I like the physical cards, but definitely you want to check that out. So this document, and I will put this as one of your downloads. Again, just go to collegeonamaze.com downloads. So we created an Excel or Google Sheet that, like I said, takes all of that 6 keys data and information and puts it in the back end. So when you go into it, you'll see on the first page, you can basically, up in this orange section, you can basically put in any university or college that is part of the IPEDS data, which is anyone getting financial aid should be in there. Now, not everyone fills out everything, so everybody should have something, but some might not report certain numbers and so forth. So what will happen is, as you put in the information into that document, you'll start seeing some colors changing. So here's just an example of financial match, and I put in a few schools: Auburn, Clemson, University of Mississippi, Mississippi State. You can see them there. And what I found is I wanted to look sort of a financial match. So green is most positive to the student. So that could be maybe easier to get into. It could be lower test scores. It could be that they give more aid. It could be that they give, lots of different things. They have higher retention rates. So green is positive, more positive for the student. White is in the middle, and yellow is just more cautionary. So in looking at financial match, very quickly, I can see that Auburn, in terms of, room and board, is the most expensive out of all of my colleges that I have on my list. And I see that Mississippi State or University of Mississippi is the cheapest for tuition. But when you look at sort of tuition, room and board, out of state, Mississippi State is one of the lower. But if I scroll down, I see Mississippi State University, over 90% of their students receive some type of aid, which is phenomenal. And then you can see the average amount of institutional aid, which is almost $11,000, $10,596. Now, if I look at University of South Carolina, Columbia, while 83% of students get some type of aid, it's only about less than $2,500. So so this is where you can start comparing and contrasting, and everything that I was showing you on the 6 keys will populate onto this chart. So really cool. You want to download that. And like I said, there are some things that are blank. So down there you see average net price. So one of the things that we want students to do, like I said, is you're going to have to find some of this information on your own. And so here we ask them to go to the college's net price calculator, put in their information, and then to type in their own numbers. Or we might have them do their own rating on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 meaning amazing, 1 being not so much. And so that will start populating some of that data, which is really cool. So fantastic document that very easily, quickly type in the schools, and you can start looking at it through the 6 keys of College Fit. So one of the things that we find in some of the process is there's a lot of college search tools out there. This is College Navigator, very similar to College Board, Big Future, and some of the other ones that are out there. They, again, typically focus on the sort of, academic match side of the house. So some of their stuff is kind of basic in terms of, required SAT scores, what type of programs they have, and it's not as in-depth. So you'll find that CDO has a lot more information. But if a student doesn't know what schools to enter into their college data organizer, which is what I just showed you, this is a great first step. So typically in the list stage, we have them go to this type of search function just to look at schools. We don't overwhelm them with the entire sheet. We just we just start with, let's look at academics, and let's kind of look at a little bit of the personal match and see what comes up. And then as they go through that process, again, they're filling out that college data organizer as they learn more information. Even at the list stage, we don't bring in a lot about finances. The reason being is there are some selective universities that if you meet their need, it's 100% provided for you. You get a full ride if you have that need. So I'd hate for a really high achieving student that's low income and could meet and get into that school because they focused on academic match, but yet could be affordable because of their means. While there's other families that are applying to those schools, but maybe they don't fall within that income, and so financial match would be really difficult for them. So there's some things that, again, we scaffold that information so it really builds as they are. The other kind of tool that we really like to use and we bring into the curriculum is something called the Common Data Set. If you don't know about the Common Data Set, Google your local university, put in Common Data Set, and then put in your university. Find the newest one, should be 24, 25. Most schools have posted already. Usually they're about a year behind. But they look at some other interesting factors. So they take that sort of academic match, kind of what type of student they're looking for, and they really share what in there. It's called C7. It's a section called C7, and they will have a little chart based on different academic and non-academic factors that are important to them. So let me go to the next slide here. So their academic factors you'll find in C7 is they will rank how important is rigor, how important is class rank, GPA, standardized test scores, application essay, and letters of recommendation. And they also list other non-academic factors: talent, ability, interviewing, character, personal qualities, extracurricular, volunteer, work experience, level of applicant interest, like demonstrated interest. And then there's some things we can't change, but they do look at it, right? First generation, alumni, where do you live, religious affiliation for some schools. Now, racial and ethnic status, it's sort of semi-removed, right? Because of the Supreme Court case a few years ago. However, schools are still looking, even though that can't be a decision process, they still want to know about a student's background, who they are, how does that influence them, to make sure they have a nice, robust group of students. So I took it out, we took it out, but it still is, in a lot of ways, can still be a factor in different things. They just don't report on it like they used to. And so in that college data organizer that I was showing you earlier, that's a download, we have this section where they can go through and they can basically look at this across the board. So I put, these are all the Florida universities. Again, I'm in Florida. So I was looking for things that, you know, how to help a student. So what's interesting, look at all this at this bottom list here, level of applicant interest. So things like FGCU, UNF, FAU, UCF, look at all the schools that actually look at, did a student visit? Did they check their emails? Did they, you know, come and see us at the college fair? So that's important for a student to know if they're like, oh, well, FGCU for us is our local four-year university. So a student might be from Estero, which is right, you know, just a few miles away from the university. Oh, I'm from Estero. I already know about FGCU. I've been there a million times, but they don't do a formal tour. Well, you know what? You probably should, because they are looking at that. Or who really is looking at GPA? Everybody. Who's looking at rigor? Pretty much everybody. Who's looking at standardized test score? We're Florida, everybody. You have to have test scores. So it just kind of helps give a picture of when you're writing that application and doing that, that they're able to do that. So again, we have a lot more information within the book, but this can really help students as they go through that process. And within that same college data organizer, there's some charts and some really cool things. Again, free download, and every year we update it with the newest IPEDS data. So the 2025 is what's on the website, and it's super nice and easy, but it is the newest data that we do have. So really important, as we kind of are finishing this up a little bit, what I would really suggest for you is, we've talked about the 6 keys of college fit. The other thing to kind of bring into the conversation is now looking at sort of what we call chance of admissions. Now, I'm sure everybody thinks that, you know, their fit, not everybody, but, you know, Harvard is my fit, UPenn is my fit, University of Chicago is my fit. So it might meet you in a lot of different ways, but we also do have to bring in selectivity into it. If only 4% of students are actually, you know, able to be a part of it, you know, we have to look at what they look at in an application, right? Both the academic and non-academic factors. So as a counselor, it's really important to bring in the student's college fit with their chance of admissions. Now, I would kind of implore you to really consider removing the terminology reach, match, safety out of your terminology, out of kind of when we talk with students in your terminology. The reason is, it could be quote unquote a safety school, but we diminish that it could be a really good fit for the student. So we like to talk about it as chance of admissions. Is my chance of admissions high? Awesome, that's great. You're meeting their academic standards. Phenomenal. You might get some scholarships, right? That's different than safety. You can see how just changing that terminology really empowers the student to make a better decision. A moderate chance of admissions, and then a low chance of admissions. So what we like to do is something called the 3x3 decision-making chart. And this is where we start bringing in those decisions. So we like to bring in that college fit. We've assessed it. Is it a high college fit, looking at all the 6 keys? Is it a moderate college fit, or is it a high college fit for you? And then bringing in that chance of admissions. What's the likelihood based on, you know, my college data organizer, the data I've looked at, reviewing all their information. And again, a little bit subjective. You have to make some assumptions here. And we put it in by a 3x3. So what's happened, if all of them are high overall fit, but low chance of admissions, that's not great for a student, because yeah, you might really love the school, but if you're highly unlikely to get a spot, don't fall in love with it, because you might not end up going there, right? So we want to see a nice balanced list. We want some, you know, schools that are a high fit and high chance of admissions. We want to see some moderate, and just a few in that low admissions. But here, besides just putting it in reach, match, safety, now the student is at the focus in the center of that conversation. Not just can I get in, but is this college really going to match who I am? So that's called the 3x3. What you do notice here in the first step, so this should happen before they apply, right? This is them building their list, deciding what they need to do. We have removed that sort of what we call desirability, because I might be in love with a college, but if I can't afford it or I don't get in, it's not going to be a good fit for me, right? So we do try to be, again, analytical and really look at the data and the information. So when we go through the process, let me see. Oh, I didn't put it on here. Let me go back. Sorry about that. Let me go back here. Sorry about that. Come back here. So sorry, I thought I had this next slide. So later in the book, once they've applied and they have if they're admitted or not, and they have their award letter, what we change out in the 3x3, instead of chance of admissions, that's where we put desirability, right? So now that we know, did we get in? How much award money are we getting? How much do we have to pay? Now we want to bring in that actual sort of emotionality, and we actually have them go back through and assess their overall fit again based on that new information of where did I get in? How expensive is it? Can I afford it? What does that look like? Now I know more information about myself. If you started that process in October and now it's, March or April, you've learned a lot in those few months. Those kids have really grown and things are happening. And so reassessing that fit, but then bringing in that desirability is part of that decision-making process. But the whole time, the student is using the 6 keys of college fit. So I will give you a story. So my daughter, who you saw the picture of earlier, we had 2 schools that we were between: a pretty selective private institution that was going to be pretty expensive, and a state university that really bigger, larger, things like that. And we took that card sort and we put college 1, college 2, and I told her she had to put each card in only one of the schools. And all of a sudden, what ended up happening is she was surprised that most of the cards went to the public university that was, going to be cheaper, was going to take her dual enrollment credits. There was a lot of things. And really what was just holding her to the other one was it was a special mission school, and it was pretty, and in a location she wanted a little bit better. But when she was able to analyze all the pros and all the cons, she could actually see how her fit has changed and what was going to be a better fit for her overall. And so it was a really powerful thing. And so we actually did that card sort all the way throughout. 1, to assess your fit in the very beginning. 2, to assess kind of each college as you're going through the process. And then 3, sort of at the end, we assessed again and went through that. So really cool little game if you definitely want to get a set of those. So what are some activities to teach the 6 keys of college fit as we kind of wrap this up? So 1, you definitely want to download that college data organizer, as I was sharing with you. It's free. Like I said, it's updated yearly. Definitely check out the 6 keys card sort activity, both the online and the physical. We also have a college visit checklist that takes the 6 keys and gives you questions for the student to ask when they go visit. So if financial match is really important, here's the questions to ask. If student outcomes is important, here's the questions to ask. Definitely use the vocabulary, right? So looking at the common data set here, talking about rigor, using the same terminology, the same vocabulary is going to really help your students navigate that process. And then really making sure that everybody has access to that knowledge, right? So your school, all of your teachers should have access, your students, your parents, other counselors, and really making sure that everybody's on the same page is really going to help you, help your families navigate this process successfully. So excited. Again, thank you for being on this presentation today. Let us know if you have any questions. If you are interested in a sample book and to see the curriculum, let us know. You can always email info@collegeunmazed.com. Just so you know, the digital version, we have an institutional license, and for a whole school curriculum with lesson plans, everything, it's under $2,000. So really reasonable for a school to have an entire curriculum at your fingertips. But if you have any other questions, definitely let me know. Check out the website, get on the newsletter so you can get more updates. We do these webinars all the time, once a month. We have blogs and different stuff going out, so you definitely want to follow us there. We're also on social media, so just check out College Unmazed. And thank you all for staying here. Again, let me know if you have any questions. My email specifically is astirk@collegeunmazed.com, but happy to connect with you if you have anything else. You have a great day. Take care.